So I know all you guys follow Nicole's amazing YouTube channel, so it's only appropriate that we catalog her imminent death.
My imminent death.
She's got a case of the altitude sickness from hell, which makes sense because we're 5,000 meters up right now at Everest Base Camp.
I recently had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to visit Tibet, a region filled with mountains, beautiful monasteries, and some of the kindest people that I have ever met. And yet, it is also one of the most difficult places in the world to go to. As a foreigner, obtaining a permit to visit Tibet is not easy. Foreigners must also be accompanied by a guide at all times. A friend of mine organized a trip to Tibet for 14 of us. So we traveled to Tibet with a group of people, and we actually divided that group into two separate groups. One that would travel along a high altitude route and one that would travel along a low altitude route. Both routes were pretty high altitude compared to normal situations, and pretty much everybody got altitude sickness at one point or another. Being a part of the high altitude route, my group went all the way to Mount Everest Base Camp. We are here for about a week exploring the beautiful countryside. It's a place that not a lot of people go to, so I thought I would make a video just talking about our journey. Lhasa is the capital of the Tibet Autonomous Region and lies at an altitude of 11,450 feet, which is approximately 3,500 meters. This makes it one of the highest cities in the world. The city is home to many important Tibetan Buddhist sites. One of these is the Potala Palace. I am here at the Potala Palace in Lhasa. Just look at how beautiful this palace is. The Potala Palace was the residence of the Dalai Lama until the 14th Dalai Lama fled to India in 1959. Today, the Potala Palace is a museum and a World Heritage Site. I just couldn't get enough of the Potala Palace. Even standing right in front of it, I felt like I was looking at a painting. It was just so magical and impressive. So over the course of 317 years, 10 Dalai Lamas actually lived in the Potala Palace. Fun fact, no building in Lhasa is allowed to be taller than the Potala Palace. Another fun fact, there are actually 8 tombs inside the Potala Palace from Dalai Lamas. Unfortunately though, you're not allowed to take pictures or videos inside of the palace. Another important place we visited was the Jokang Temple, which is located in Barkor Square. Tibetans generally consider this the most sacred temple in Tibet, and today it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site as an extension of the Potala Palace. Since Lhasa lies at such a high elevation, almost all of us felt a little dizzy during the first day. In fact, one of our friends ended up in the hospital on the first night in Lhasa with severe altitude sickness. But an IV and some oxygen got him back on his feet in about a day, and he was still able to continue along with us on the high altitude route. Whether or not that was a good idea, we'll find out later. We departed Lhasa after spending 2 days and 1 full night there, which is honestly, in my opinion, way too soon because we hadn't fully acclimated to the altitude yet. But on we went. My group was assigned a Tibetan tour guide and a Chinese driver, and we drove eastward through the Tibetan countryside. Looking out the window, you can just see the beauty everywhere. Rivers flowing through the countryside with majestic mountains behind them. Goats, yak, and other domestic animals roaming the land. Nature's so pure and untouched, it makes you wish you could just jump out of the van and soak it all in. But there was a lot of driving ahead of us, and the majority of what we saw through the van windows. Our destination for the first night was a city called Shigatse, which is the second largest city in the Tibet Autonomous Region. On the way, we made a few memorable stops. Our first stop was at a viewpoint from which you observe much of the Tibetan countryside. At this stop, there were plenty of vendors who had yak, Tibetan mastiffs, and tiny little goats on display to take pictures with, at a cost, of course. Our second stop was at a crystal clear turquoise lake called Yamdrok Lake. No pictures can do this lake justice. It totally blew me away and was definitely one of the highlights of this road trip. While down at the lake, I gave in to the temptation to get a picture of myself sitting on a yak with the lake in the background. Taking a picture on a yak here costs on average about 20 yuan, which is the equivalent of about $3 US. Yak is one of the main sources of food in Tibet. Tibetans eat yak meat, produce yak butter, cheese, milk, and yogurt. Yak to Tibetans are basically what cows are to Americans. They use them for most of their food products. Supposedly, eating yak also helps with altitude sickness, but being a vegetarian, I myself did not try this. If you're visiting Tibet, just be aware that yak is going to be pretty much on every menu. Our third stop was at a little hiking trail that led to a beautiful glacier. Now, this 30-minute hike would have been a piece of cake at a lower altitude, but at approximately 17,000 feet or 5,000 meters, it took a huge toll on me. I overestimated how fast I could go, and by the time I reached the glacier, I was feeling extremely lightheaded, nauseous, and dizzy. I felt so out of it that I barely took any photos up there, at least compared to the photos I normally take, because it was just so much effort to stay upright and just not fall over. Back in the van, I developed the worst migraine of my entire life. I felt as though my head was going to explode, and I spent the rest of the day hiding my head under different objects so that I wouldn't come into contact with the light, and I was trying not to get sick in the van. So yeah, I spent the rest of that ride just hiding. Unsurprisingly, I don't have any video footage from the rest of that day, simply because I had a pillow on my face most of the time. After spending a night in Shigatse and acclimating, we prepared for another long drive to Mount Everest Base Camp. With breaks, the drive was going to take us about 8 hours or so. However, there was just one problem. A girl in our group fell sick with food poisoning, so what we ended up doing is taking her to the hospital to accelerate her recovery. Although we had planned to leave early in the morning, this definitely delayed us and we didn't leave until about midday, which also meant that we were going to make fewer stops than we had initially planned for. We did, however, make a few stops at some interesting lookout points, but they were short and the drive was quite brutal. As we approached Mount Everest, though, our excitement grew and grew. How many people get to see Mount Everest with their own eyes? I mean, it's more now than it used to be, but still, it felt really special. Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world. The elevation is 29,000 feet, or 8,800 meters, above sea level. Climbing Mount Everest, however, is no easy feat. More than 300 people have died while making the climb, and in 2019, 12 people have already died during the climb, at least at the time that I'm making this video. It costs tens of thousands of dollars to climb Mount Everest, too. We arrived at Mount Everest Base Camp right before sunset. Our guide brought us to the tent where we would be sleeping. All of us were worried about sleeping in a tent in freezing cold temperatures, but it was actually not as bad as I expected. The tent was owned by a Tibetan family and it was huge. It could fit up to 12 people, and it was quite warm when the stove was on. The family also provided thick green coats that we could wear if our own clothes wasn't warm enough. I definitely took one. I didn't care how silly it would make me look. After putting on a thick green jacket, we followed our guide outside to walk to the Rongbuk Monastery. This is the highest elevation monastery in the world at approximately 16,300 feet or 5,000 meters. Walking up the little hill that overlooks the monastery was only about 200 feet, but at this elevation, doing this was a struggle. I could feel myself getting dizzy again, and I walked at a snail's pace to try not to get sick. So as you guys might or might not know, there are two ways to climb up Mount Everest. You can access it from the Tibetan side or from the Nepal side. The Tibetan side is a little easier to climb than the Nepal side, but it is also more expensive and a little bit harder to get to. However, I am not climbing Mount Everest. Don't worry, I am not that fit. What's up, Jake? Where are we at right now?
Right now we are at Everest Base Camp, graced by the great Choma Lama.
What's that?
That is Everest in the local dialect, right, my friend?
This is Sera, guide. Yes, we are standing on the roof of the wall, the height of 5,050 meters. And then on the left of my side, we have a beautiful 8th century monastery called Rongbuk Monastery. On the right, we have a great little yak and a tent base where we're going to spend the night here.
How many times have you been here?
More than 70 times.
Wow.
Oh my God.
So he has taken incredible care of us. They prepped an incredible tent for us to sleep in tonight.
What do you guys think of it?
This is a luxury tent, if I've ever seen one. and just told us everything we need to know along the way. We've had 2 hospitalizations to get here. Every obstacle you could imagine, we came up way too fast. So if anybody's thinking about doing this, we recommend you prep a little bit, take a few days in Lhasa to get used to the elevation, and then start to come up. But we did it in about 2 days, which was breakneck speed. We all have headaches, but Kieran here is keeping us well in stock with lemon ginger tea, which is helping us all out quite a bit. And I'm just gonna shut up and let you guys enjoy the view a little bit, because it is absolutely incredible.
I really wanted to film a video here, but to be honest, it's hard to talk. So most likely I'm filming most of this video after the fact, but I wanted to give you a glimpse of this beautiful place. The sun just set. It is getting really, really cold really fast, and I have the worst headache probably of my life. I felt the altitude sickness coming on once again. After taking a few pictures, I sat down and meditated, hoping I could prevent the onset of altitude sickness. While it seemed to help in the moment, the effects were short-lived. While walking back to the tent, I felt sicker and sicker, and soon I felt like I could barely move. I had another severe migraine, extreme nausea, and doing anything just took so much effort. Although I ordered food, I had no appetite to eat it, and at this point it was only going to get worse, so my guide made the decision to hook me up to the oxygen tank, which was something he didn't want to do unless somebody really hit a severe level of altitude sickness.
Hey Nicole,
Yeah,
how's your first oxygen treatment experience so far?
first time getting oxygen. I hope it brings me back to life. How nice would it be to have it all night?
All night when you
Yeah, then your head would explode.
this is maximum half an hour.
Yeah, let's start with a half hour, see how that goes.
The oxygen definitely helped me get through the night at Mount Everest Base Camp, but I never fully recovered. During the night, the headaches and nausea kept me awake. Meanwhile, my friends Tina and Jake were also feeling the altitude sickness and getting really nauseous, and they were unable to sleep. So we started to share the oxygen. When our guide came to wake us up at sunrise and told us to go out and enjoy the sunrise, we just didn't have the energy to get up because we basically had a sleepless night behind us. So we missed the sunrise, but we did, however, take a short walk a couple of hours later and enjoyed views of Mount Everest. Altitude sickness is no joke, and if I could change anything about this trip, it's that I would spend more time acclimating in Lhasa before heading to a higher altitude. Mount Everest was the ultimate destination, and the next 2 days were primarily spent on the road heading back to Lhasa with just a few stops along the way. When we arrived back in Lhasa, we felt strong and energetic. That 12,000 foot altitude, it felt like nothing compared where we had just been. Before heading back to our hotel, we made an afternoon stop at Sera Monastery, which is particularly famous for its debate sessions. Debates among monks are integral to the learning process in the colleges of the Sera Monastery complex. Visitors can witness the debates every day in the debating courtyard, but for some weird reason you are only allowed to take photos with your phone and not with an actual camera. Don't ask me why. Before going to Tibet, I had read that it was a very spiritual place, but I didn't quite realize the extent of it. Every Tibetan I met was highly spiritual. And by highly spiritual, I mean meditating every day, saying mantras under their breath, and practicing kindness and compassion wherever they could. I think we could all learn a little bit from the Tibetan people. We can learn to slow down, to practice compassion, and to practice just living in the moment. Now, I just want to add a little bit of a disclaimer to this video. The Tibet Autonomous Region is controlled by China, and foreigners do not have the freedom to travel around this area on their own. So everything that I experienced and saw was everything that foreigners are allowed to see. I know there is so much more to Tibet that I have no way of seeing, but I truly hope that one day there will be more freedom in Tibet that will allow us to see different parts of it. I wanted to create this video both as a memory for myself and because there seems to be a lack of footage coming out of Tibet lately. I do hope that more of the world will be able to see the magic and beauty that finds itself in Tibetan culture. My journey was one that I will never forget, and not just because of the altitude sickness, but also because of literally everything I saw. I know this video is a little bit different than what I usually post on my channel, but I hope that you enjoyed taking this journey with me. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos like these, and let me know in the comments, have you ever been to Tibet and what was your impression? Till next time.